Hey everyone, welcome to the video on terms of trade. This is one of the trickier concepts that we're going to encounter in this particular outcome. Please feel free to, as I always say, watch over this video a couple of times and go back over areas that you're not quite sure about. Let's get into it. All right, so before we get started, I just wanted to give you a bit of a heads up on kind of the three areas of the study design that we're talking about here in regards to terms of trade. And there's kind of three that we're looking for. So the first one is, what is the terms of trade? And that's the first two elements of the study design where they talk about the meaning and the measurement, okay? I'll go into that in a little bit. So I want you to learn the meaning and the measurement as one kind of piece of learning. That's the easiest part on what we'll be doing. Then you move on to the factors that change the terms of trade. So I've drawn arrows here intentionally, okay? So we've got terms of trade in the middle there, and we've got things that actually cause a change to the terms of trade. All right, we're going to learn a little bit later that that is about the prices of imports and the prices of exports are the two things that are going to change the terms of trade. And then the last part in the study design regarding the terms of trade is, okay, well, when the terms of trade changes, what effect does that have on other things? Okay, so if the terms of trade goes up, for example, how does that affect certain other things? All right, so you're going to see this is kind of three main sections. What is the terms of trade? What are the things that affect the change in the terms of trade? And then the third one is, okay, well, when the terms of trade has changed, what is the effect on something else? You're very rarely going to get a question that asks for all three of these. The questions will usually only ask you about one of them. So just make sure when you're answering your questions regarding terms of trade, then you're clear on which one of these three it's actually asking you about. All right, so we're going to start with the meaning and measurement. And as you can see, the arrows are grayed out. So we're just talking about what it is as a concept. So the meaning of terms of trade is the definition. And the definition is kind of the same as the measurement, which is the formula, okay? Because the definition of terms of trade is the index of export prices compared to the index of import prices. So that's good news. We've only got one thing to learn. But when we're really talking about the meaning of terms of trade here, there's one really key part that students frequently make mistakes on, and that is this. The terms of trade is purely a measurement of export prices and import prices that have already happened. And this is a really important distinction to make, okay? So when we learn about the index of export prices and the index of import prices, think of the terms of trade as kind of like a ledger or a record of what's happened to our export prices and what's happened to our import prices. And the reason why I stress that this is a collection of information that has already happened is we don't make the jump from the terms of trade changing, to decision making by key economic agents. So for example, the mistake a lot of students make will be, okay, the terms of trade has increased due to, let's say, an increase in export prices. As a result, we're going to sell less exports. That's not entirely true, okay? Because the export prices, the increase to the terms of trade due to the increase in export prices, those transactions that have caused that change have already happened. Our overseas customers have already purchased at that higher price, and then that is recorded as an increase to the terms of trade. So that's really, really important, guys, okay, that you're only looking at the effects of what the terms of trade indicate on the specific areas of the study design, and don't make the leap from a change in the terms of trade affecting future economic decision making, okay? This will start to make more sense the more practice we get. Okay, before we go into it, I need to go into a little bit on what is an index, okay? An index number is an economic data figure which reflects price or quantity compared with a standard base value. And that's the really important part here. All right, so when I bring up, let's say we're looking at a graph of the price of sneakers here. I'm going to use as an example. You've got price on the y-axis and you've got time in years along the x-axis. So if we have the price here of sneakers starting at $150 a pair, the average price, and then going to $300 a pair, all right, that's kind of cool. That's good information on its own, and that's kind of all you need. Now, what an index does is it looks at the change, and that's what an index is used for, okay? It's designed to show you the change in percentage terms. It doesn't really matter so much what the unit of measurement, which in this case is dollars. It doesn't also really matter what the starting price and the end price was. The index isn't used for that because you can just use the normal graph like we've got here for that information. What an index is going to show you is the growth, okay? The growth from here, this position, which was year one, to the current position that you're at. So we're looking at this as a growth percentage. And then so when we plot that same information, but as an index, you'll see here, we've got this important number of 100. Okay, now for most economic indicators that have an index, 100 is what we call this base value, the starting point. So whenever year one was, or year zero, that price was 100, and then we're just measuring the relative rates of growth. So the index, in this case, would be shaped like this, okay? We've gone from 100 index points to 200 index points, indicating a growth of 100 index points, okay? Or a doubling of index points. This example is really easy because that's also the same here. So we're going to go into a more complex example of how that works. But if this finishing point, let's say, was 1,000, just as an example, okay, you could say that the price for sneakers is 10 times what it was from year one, because 100 times 10 is 1,000. It doesn't tell you what the price was. All an index does is show you the relative change in whatever value that is. Let's look at some other things. So we're still using our same information there, our price of sneakers and our index price of sneakers. Okay, so as we said, that was 200 index points. All right, what using an index enables us to do is compare the growth rates or the relative rates of change across two very different things. It might be things that are measured in a different way. So in this case, we're doing dollars and kilometers, or it might enable you to compare the relative rates of change for really big numbers and really small numbers. Because a really big number starts as a really big number, and a really small number will start, and so the relative rates of change will be the same. So what I want you to have a look at here is if this is, I think I said 25,000 as the final point here, just pause the video and have a quick prediction on what is the final index point here going to say. So we increased by 5,000 kilometers. Our base index is 100. That should be down here on 100, sorry. What does that second point represent? Pause the video and have a go. And if you'd said 120 index points, you would be correct because 5,000 is 20% bigger than 20,000 here. Okay, it's grown by 5,000, therefore the growth rate is 20% from base year one. It doesn't matter that it's gone up and down like this. Okay, we just look at the position we're interested in and find the growth rate there. Okay, the price of sneakers has increased more since base year than kilometer of roads. I don't know why I chose that. I guess because you run on the road when you're in sneakers. I don't know. So that's a bit of background on what an index is, okay? So it's important when you're writing questions on terms of trade, you don't say things like, it's increased by 25%, because that's not true. It's increased by 25 index points. All right, here's another real example from economics on why we use an index. So we can compare very different things. So you'll see consumer sentiment on the left-hand side here. That's what we generally call consumer confidence. That's measured through a survey. So that's really weird. And then you've got on the right-hand side, you've got the average share price of certain share portfolios here. Now, the share portfolios are in dollars and the consumer sentiment is in like survey responses. Those are two things you can't normally compare. But if you have a particular metric for the consumer sentiment at base level, yeah, and you can see here they've got at the top, average since 1980 equals 100. That's your base measure. Your base year was 1980. You can see this here, which looks around, I don't know, 78, 78 points. It's 78 points below 100, so you could say it's dropped 22 index points since 1980, or as it happens to be, this particular time here, which also was 100. So what's interesting here is you can say, okay, well, at the start of 2020, so we're looking at this point here, consumer confidence or consumer sentiment is 100 index points. What does that tell you about the change in consumer confidence since 1980? And you should have said it's the same. So consumers in 2020, at the start of 2020, had the same level of consumer confidence as they did in 1980. And now it's even worse, as you can see now. Then when we look at the right-hand chart here, you can see, okay, well, here's our base of 100 again. Notice consumer sentiment was started in 1980. This didn't start till, I think, 1993, it looks like. But you can see the numbers here are way bigger than the ones we're seeing over on the consumer sentiment side. But that's okay, we can still compare. If, pardon me, if we're just looking at the dips here, then you can see that this one has fallen roughly 27% in that little dip time. I just did the maths. Yeah, it's roughly 300 over 1100. And that enables you to go, well, hang on a minute, we've got 27% fall here in share price and 22% fall in consumer confidence. And then as an economist, you can start to draw some connections and go, well, maybe these two things are related. When we see consumer sentiment rise, I would assume you would see an increase in the share price and vice versa.